Okay, in this video, I'm using FFmpeg to screen capture my desktop for this video. So I have a video on this, and I'll put it up in the top right if you're interested in FFmpeg screen capture to MP4. So to continue, this video is about bringing MP4s, TV shows, movies, and upgrading your collection to a newer codec. That's the basic gist. You might not want x265 if you're doing video clips, like say video editors. I use x264. So we're going to touch on all of these. There's a winter project I'm doing that inspired this, but basically I'm going to use all the tools I use from video editing to conditioning clips to taking movies, TV shows, and cartoons and bringing them with a newer, encoding them with a newer codec and making them more compatible with my Android devices and that kind of thing. So roughly, I'm going to start with the simple concepts of my files, what I'm doing, and it's going to get more detailed as the video goes on. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below when you're finished. Where do I start? I'm using FFmpeg and Media Info. Those are command line. At least FFmpeg is command line. So don't be intimidated. If you're not too familiar with batch files, this might be a little rough, but I have on my website all these batch files ready-made to work. You just have to do a little editing. So let's get to the concept. There's two different types of batch files I use. One for using multiple or converting multiple files all at once. That's the file queue and the subroutine here that I've highlighted. The other type is just with the brackets, and they're like one-offs. So the difference between them is this one, and let me bring up a visual aid here. This one, the file queue and the subdirectory they use non-local files. So anything from a NAS or network storage device, and it copies to your PC, that kind of thing. The ones with the brackets, you just need to put your TV show or movie in a folder on your computer, and it just handles everything in there. So you have to manually do everything. For people who just want to see what's going on, that's probably a better option, especially for movies. The file queue, it's moving and checking different directories. There's a naming scheme, so it might be kind of complex to try all at once. Or movies, which are just one-off, which you would maybe take a default and maybe duplicate this and maybe put in the name of your movie if you just want to bring up a movie to x265. So I'm going to demonstrate the insides of the batch file, what they do, how they work, how it interacts with the sub, and then go into FFmpeg, the individuals if you're doing movies. There's going to be a lot of cool things that you can do with the audio and just basic general tools, not only with just automating and doing re-encoding, but actually getting in there and changing the audio, a whole bunch of stuff. So this is going to do a lot of different things. I'm going to touch on a lot of stuff. So before I get into the different tools, that would be like, let me give you a little hint, audio codec conversion, changing the gain or limit the audio, changing the container from MP4 to MKV and back, and then encoding. So that's a tool I created, FFmpeg Ultimate Tool, and you can get that on my website or Softpedia. And let me mention my website URL real quick, gammaphase.ultravista.org. You can find all that there. So, and I'll get into exactly where after I get through a little bit more of the video and explaining. So I've already got a video, a little older video, but it basically handles the automation of this process to re-encoding to x265. I'll put that in the top corner. That has a little bit more demonstration, just a little bit a different way I did it. But it's a remote computer. I remoted in with Desk, open source, remoting in, and that is in another room. It heats up that room, and that's to, if I'm going to encode, I'm going to utilize the heat in winter, which I am, and in a certain room. Trying to utilize all the energy I'm using to benefit myself. So let me touch on what the batch files look like. I'll give a real rough summary of what it does. Has really evolved. They were real simple before, and I've updated it to be more user-friendly, more informative, and optimized as much as I can, but yet be functional and eye-pleasing. It sets the title, sets a lot of settings here in the variables like the subroutine, the media temp location, and the destination for the NAS. Here it gives kind of a summary of what's going on. So let's say I just want to run this. Don't be afraid to run any of these commands without adding a file, because basically what this will do is show you what the settings are. So it'll show you the subroutine name, the temp locations, and everything. So they can't really ruin any of your media if you don't add anything to it or don't have it configured right. So go ahead and run those whenever you feel like it, especially the subroutine, because what it shows is the settings that FFmpeg uses to make your movie or TV show work correctly. So like this one's for tune animation. You wouldn't want to have that for movies. So you'd want to have the right subroutine, maybe put MOV or movie at the end to identify this as something for a movie. And then of course the different settings to help you accomplish that. So you can just click out of it. So don't be afraid to run those. But you can just look inside and it will tell you up top your settings. And there's your settings that are displayed. Error checking, this section gets how many batch files, 1 to 1,000 if you want, but I recommend maybe just doing a couple to see how it works. Maybe it's a couple small files like cartoons, something that doesn't take a half an hour to encode, or you could just take a little clip just to see if the process runs consecutively. Just take little clips, drag them onto the file queue, like 2 of them, and just to test before you make your processor or your computer work really hard for something that's just a test. So it gets the file count, active, and the total. And this line here designates the header or the top of the file queue where the loop comes back to. So it does some checks to make sure the copied file isn't in your media temp folder. And if it exists in your destination, it will skip. So if you've already processed this file and it stayed in the destination folder, it'll say, hey, we've already done it, skip. So then it just goes down to check for next file queue. Then if there is another one, it uses the shift command to shift the %1, which holds the file. It will just change %2 and it will move that value to the %1. So that's for easy encoding. And then it'll jump right back up and start its checks. So when it first starts, there's 3 stages. It basically copies. If everything exists and everything's A-OK to go, it will copy. And you should probably use the batch file copy, not my version because I don't supply it. It will tell what program is active and put that in the title bar with the total that you have to process and the current file. And then after the first one processes, then it will have the duration of the last one, how long it took to process. So check in, like if you're on a remote computer, check in on it to see how much time this is taking for each one. That will let you know in the title bar. Okay, maybe if you have 10 and each take 10 minutes, so that would be 100 minutes. So you can kind of do it that way. It's more informative that way. Stage 2 is the actual encoding. So the call calls the subroutine, and that's the encoding part. So while we're in the coding, let's go to the encoding batch file. It has some settings, time, that kind of thing. It also changes the title, tell us what it's doing, a little FFmpeg show, metadata. This is added. It's displayed if there's no file, but this is added to the MP4 in the metadata in case you're curious on what you use to do the file. Of course, make sure the FFmpeg exists in the folder. It'll ask you environmental table where it's located, so you always use the one that you need. Error checking for a backup file. A lot of this error checking is already done, but it doesn't hurt to have it again. Here is the actual encoding process. This is the actual line of code. Basically, I need to stress that the caret used makes the next line act as if it's on one line. So all this is one line, actually. The caret makes it possible so you can edit or change each one of these lines without scrolling all the way through a long line. So that's the batch coding there, the caret. Make sure there's no spaces behind here, because then it'll act as the next line is a different line and it's not a command, and it'll error out, say this command isn't valid, blah, 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 blah. So make sure that if you have any errors, it's probably a space behind the caret. After it's done encoding, it will have a choice come up. So it'll ask you if this quit while in the middle of the encoding. So don't even touch it. You don't have to touch any keys. It will automatically time out to continue working. But if you did, in the middle of the coding, hit the Q key, which makes the new encoding, if you're stopping it in the middle, it's no good. So what this does is it deletes the bad encoding that was halfway, and then renames the file back to its original name for you to either delete if it's in a file queue, or to leave it to just handle it manually. So then it's done with the file queue. It just says the time, goes back to file queue. So right after the call here, it calculates the elapsed time it took for that file. And that's this right here. And then, of course, it makes a log file. And the log file is the name of the file queue. It just has the .log after it. So it will put this information of the file date, the time it started, and the current time, which is the end time, what was active, like it was the first file active or whatever, and then the total count, and then of course the path, the subdirectory routine, and then it will just keep appending this log. Here's a leftover stage 3 kind of cleanup. I don't know if you really need it. It just, if the file size is less than 300K or whatever, then it errors out, because usually movies or clips should be longer than that. And then it does some cleanup. Let me see, optional message, if temp folder is missing, then it errors out and then goes to a critical stop where it displays the message for you to either correct or just exit. It copies the newly created x265 MP4, and then it copies it over and then deletes the old x260, or it copies over the x265 to the folder in the NAS or network storage device, and then deletes what it copied over. Kind of cleans everything up so it's empty. Then it checks for next file in the file queue. Here's where the optional stop, if this file exists, it just stops. It sends a message, optional stop was triggered, and then it goes down to here, displays the message, and pauses for your action next. If you want to continue or delete or stop the batch file from running if you're done for the day, and continue it next time or next day. So then it will show you if there's another file behind next to go, and the shift command tells it, okay, shift it from %2, move that new file into the position of the old file, so then it can just loop and loop and loop and do a new media file every time. So if it doesn't exist, it just stops and ends there, and either shuts down or just continues to loop. But if it's done with the last, let's say you did 10 files and it just did the 10th file, then it comes down, copies the log file to the destination. You can have that or not have that. Delete that or rem that out if you don't like that. Optional shutdown. So if this file exists, it was set up here, optional shutdown.tmp. And then I set it to parameter optional shutdown equals 1. So if that does equals 1, then it will just automatically shut down your computer. So that is quickly the batch file, and of course the one-off if you're doing movies. It's got a little bit different structure, but it's pretty close to the same. I could get into the XVID. Maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. So we went through the concept. If you have like a movie, if you want to basically put that into the x265 category before you change a movie, make sure that the movie has the audio correct. So let's say you have a movie, like say Dune, the new Dune movie. The audio is terrible. The talking is really low, but the action scenes are really high. If you look at the waveform, I've got that video I used to change all that. So I brought the talking up to louder or just as loud as the action, so you don't need to change the volume. So I'll put that movie link, that video I made, on the specifics on how to do that up at the top right. But all these files, all these media files can be altered just like that. So I'm kind of getting away from my batch file here, and I just quickly want to touch on the FFmpeg Ultimate tool, get into a little bit of this, because this inspired me to go that one step forward in using FFmpeg and XVID or X264 to alter and make my movies better, smaller in size, optimized to how I want it. So if you're changing from a Adobe 5.1 to stereo, this FFmpeg will do that, and it uses a script or batch file to do all this. And this is what I based off of all my batch files that I am talking about today, the file queue and that kind of thing. Also the screen capture, I've also got that video. I think I'll put it up in the top right hand corner if you're interested in that video. Of course, I've also diverged into correcting the video. Not so much color, just like for cartoons, for the different dimensions. There's a 704 by 720. That's a little bit different. I've got two batch files for that, for the different frame size. But there's pixelization on the outside, whether that's a Vidimux doing it or some kind of little glitch. There's like pixelization just around the square dimensions of the video. So I had to make a draw box. FFmpeg will do that. They've got a filter. I can draw stuff. I can delogo, that kind of thing. So I've made one, and this can do multiple files. Also based off of the video I'm doing today and the FFmpeg Ultimate tool. So make sure you go to and get those resources on my website. Let me go, since I kind of went through pretty much all of these, you really need to, you might have a tough time going to my website. So like I said, gammaphase.ultravista.org. So once you go there, you can either, well, for the batch files, let me go to About, Author, Batch Code, Examples. And of course, all my batch files are up in this area right here, FFmpeg file queue. You just click on this link and it will rapid to the section where you need to just click this button, and then it selects, right click, copy, and then that way you can paste and use the batch file however you want. So let me wrap it up. There's that. There's the FFmpeg subroutine for animation. I didn't touch on the X264 file queue. That's also here. It's very similar, except it uses FFmpeg to strip out or extract the audio to M4A, then do the X264 encoding how you want, then put the audio back in using FFmpeg. So a little bit different. It still works, and that resource is there. Of course, my screen capture for all my computers, for my Windows 7 and Windows 10, there's certain settings. They're all here. Capture screen, and then just go to that. And then those are the actual settings. Of course, you might want to change. Some of them are frame rate 15, but you would put the frame rate that you wanted. So that's all there. As far as the settings for the FFmpeg and the X264, here I have a batch file cheat sheet if you're curious about what each command does and how you're supposed to type it in, what they represent. There's that if you need it. If you need the actual code of the settings, put in PDF and search, and you have PDF resources that you can print out for a Vidimux settings, or just the X264 raw exe settings. Of course, there's the batch sheets again, or let me put in X265, and there should be whole sections on what you can put in as far as the code. It's probably more PDF. There's a preview page that'll show you. I've done some highlighting and some of my own notes that describe what each setting, what you should and shouldn't use. And you can just either click on the page or click this little link to download the PDF. And I should have a lot of PDFs. But if I don't, I'll put them in the comments if I update my website, which I do a lot. So that's the resource. That's how you get to it. Of course, all my programs that I've created are here. Here's the FFmpeg. I've got a zip program I use. Xvid calculator, size calculator, but all my media tools, let me see, best programs, that would have a lot of programs in it, themes, but go to the media, download media and tools. There it will have a good resource. These are all linked to the original website. Picture of the original websites here, what version of FFmpeg you need for operating system that you're using. Sometimes that can be daunting to get the right size, especially if you're not a Windows 10 avid user. So you can download all the programs from there, or at least get the information you need. Of course, media info is a huge part of that. You need to, on your clips, you need to know, okay, do I need to convert this to x264 or x265? If I'm doing video clips, I want to keep it x264. So I suggest the x264, like if you're using Shotcut or any video editor, like if I want these clips easy editing, I have the iframes like every, 50 or 60 frames. Bigger file size, but if you're using small clips, this batch file is great because it'll tell you the thread. Make sure you're descriptive in what these batch files do for all of them. Name them how you want so they're descriptive and tell you what they're used for. So I've got the quality, the GOP size, and the codec version I'm using. So yeah, it can get kind of complicated, but it should be simple enough if you use what I've got you to, so far, a good place to start. Media info, that is a must-have as far as I'm concerned, because how do you know what, like either cartoons or movies, what they were encoded at? So basically, I have a cascading menu here, and if I didn't go through this before, I have a video on how to create this with your own programming or batch file to basically add what you want. So I'll put that at the top right-hand corner, the video on how to make this for Windows 7 and 10. It's also on my website. So I want media info, and just by the name, I can't really tell if this was encoded correctly, or what it was used, or what was used to get it to where it is. So here I know that the Core 120 is a 2010 Avidimux version, and then all the settings it used. So it did a little deblock, that's for animation. So it had the animation already built into it to make it simplified, to take the quality out. So all these settings are there, including the iframe, the quality, the CRF, constant frame rate or constant rate factor number. That's important to know. So if you try to make a video with a higher CRF, constant rate factor, you can't really get more quality out of it than it was originally created. So if you want to do that, you would have to have the over-the-air program, like a converter box DVR function, to get that original quality, and then you could change it to lossless, like a CRF of 0. But since we know this is a CRF of 20, I wouldn't go anything below that number. You're not going to get anything extra out of it than what it was originally encoded at. So we know what we can do with this. We can go to x265 and we get the information from the quality and the different settings. So then that would be a good candidate to actually do x265. A lot of times it might not be worth changing your collection to an x265. It just depends. Sometimes x264 is good enough. Sometimes it's done so well that you don't see much savings to convert it to an x265. You just got to try and figure out what works and what doesn't. So media info is good to see what it was actually encoded with. Yeah, this one I know it's got the coding number. It was 32-bit, and the quality that was put in it is very important. So that's touched on my batch files. The original batch files are in its original form right here. They should work. If they don't, put something in the comments. You might have to do some changing of, where the routine is located. Use the full path name or short file names if you can. Yeah, just the full path if you can, and maybe have some test files, because this isn't a destructive kind of a batch file unless you do the one-offs. That would be like if you're using the ones with a bracket, like a movie. Do not put your original movie with no backup copy into the temp folder to work on it. Make sure you have a backup of everything, especially when you're using this one-off thing, because it will change and delete the original. So that's why it would probably be best to work off of a NAS. That would be the file queue. Now, you can use one file or many files. So just make sure it has the right sub routine, and that is safe because the originals are on your network storage device, copied to your computer, and then copied to a different folder on the network storage device. So there's two different copies that you can decide whether to overwrite the old 264 or not. But that gives you a chance to make the decision on your own. So very important. So media info is very important. All these are free. Go to my website for those. I think I've touched on everything I really need to. Web page, what they look like. Of course, here's a simple diagram. Basically, if whatever PC you were using, whether this be an old network PC and you're remoting in, or if this is your original, you just copy or select a whole bunch of MP4s, drag it to the file queue, and then it will start the process of the checks, encoding, and then copying to the new folder, the x265, using the subroutine and the FFmpeg to do the heavy lifting. I haven't got into the x264.exe yet. I have not been successful. I've only been successful for the x264 and FFmpeg. So I'm going to stick with that until I can figure out the x265. So maybe if I figure that out, I will do another video. But for right now, I think that'll get you enough to get started. Be careful, always have a backup of your media files. But if you want to shave a third of the file size but keep the same quality, use my batch files. So have a good one. I hope this has helped. Add a comment, add a like, or any comments you have, please put them on there. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks a lot.